On this week's edition of Coach B's Ballers, we're going to take a look at the leaders who make their athletes great. So let's dive into my list of the top coaches I competed against throughout my career. My passion to teach and coach was fueled by my high school coach, Ron Stevens. Coach Stevens became the head coach at Edgerton High School in 1974, prior to my sophomore season, and it was his enthusiasm and energy that made me want to teach and coach. I began my coaching career in college at Ohio Northern University in 1978. After being on the team for 2 years, I was cut my junior year and offered a position as a student assistant by head coach Gail Doherty and assistant Joe Campoli. These 2 seasons, under the direction of these 2 outstanding coaches, fueled my passion to coach. Upon graduating from ONU in 1980, I took a job as a junior high reading teacher, a cross-country coach, and a JV basketball coach under George Hamlin at Fort Loramie High School. If you don't know about Shelby County basketball, you should. There's a great tradition among teams in that league. Fort Loramie, Jackson Center, Anna, Russia, and Botkins. I stayed there for 4 years and then proceeded to take a varsity assistant job in Ontario in 1984. In 1985, I was named the boys varsity basketball coach in Ontario, and the first top coach on my list is the one reason that I got that job, and that gentleman is Rob Sheldon. Rob was the boys varsity coach at North Central High School in northwest corner of Ohio during my senior year in high school. I do have to brag that we beat the Eagles 3 times my senior year, and I believe I averaged over 20 points a game in those 3 games. I bring Rob up in my coaching career because it was him who contacted our superintendent at Ontario, Greg Morris, and recommended me for the job. Rob had worked for Greg when Greg was the principal at North Central. Rob, of course, was the longtime coach at Winford High School for 24 years. He compiled 450 wins in his career with a winning percentage of 70%, and he made 2 trips to the state tournament. Ontario versus Winford became a yearly 2-game rivalry that was one of the best in the area, highlighted by many outstanding memories. One of those memories is one of my worst. In 2001 district finals, where after beating the Royals twice during the regular season, we lost on a half-court hook shot at the buzzer. I put Rob on that list because he was always willing to share to help make my team better. An example would be during 2000 and 2001, we had an All-Ohio player named Benji Hall. One day when I was picking up teeth from Rob, he showed me a play in his playbook that he said I needed to run for Benji. Rob Sheldon, one of the coaches on my list. Another coach that was early in my career was a guy named Dave Fralick. Dave became the head coach at Colonel Crawford High School in 1983, a year prior to me arriving in Ontario. Dave was a great friend of Rob's, and when I arrived in Ontario, those 2 took me under their wing as we worked camps together, went to clinics together, and shared many other ideas over the years. Dave spent 9 years at Colonel Crawford High School and then finished his career at his alma mater, Van Wert High School. Pro won 420 games in his coaching career and is in the Ohio High School Coaches Hall of Fame. I respected Dave for how he prepared his teams and especially was impressed how he ran set plays to get his best players the ball. Although I did not match up against the big fella as much as I did with Rob, we did play several non-league games over the years and met several times in the tournament. One of the other coaches I really respected in the area and really learned a lot from is probably one of the best to ever coach in the Mansfield area, and that's Greg Collins. In his 7 seasons at Lexington, he won 2 state championships in 1988, 89, and then again in 1990-91. In that time, he had three 20-plus win seasons. He followed that up with a 12-year stint at Mansfield Senior, beginning in 1996 and ending in 2008. During his tenure at senior high, he amazed 6 20-plus win seasons, made 2 appearances in the state tournament. Greg was one of the toughest coaches to go against because of his attention to detail. He left no stone unturned in his scouting reports. After Greg's time at Lex, and prior to his time at Mansfield Senior, I remember sitting down with him to discuss his philosophy. And one of the things that always stuck with me was that he required his coaches to always wear the school's shirt during the practices. So, for example, when he was at Lex, all of his coaches had to wear something with Lexington basketball. And I kind of asked what was the reason for that, because he wanted his athletes to understand the importance that they represented Lexington basketball. He didn't want his coaches wearing an Ohio State shirt or anything like that. Kind of one of the philosophies I adapted with my coaches in my career was that we were Ontario, and we were wearing Ontario stuff every day at practice. Greg Collins, one of the best ever in this area. Fourth guy on my list, Steve Gray. How can I go without saying Coach Gray would not be on my list? Coach Gray is a longtime friend that we usually talked on a weekly basis during the season and did much the same in the offseason. Steve and I matched up against each other in our annual rivalry game when he was at Lexington, and then had the pleasure of facing him twice a year when we went into the NOL together. After the split of the NOL, we seemed to meet in the district tournament each year. Steve was at Lexington for 8 years, but is best known for his 20-plus years at Norwalk. He has a tremendous run in Norwalk from 2011 to 2014, where his teams went undefeated during the 2011 and 12 season and the 2012 and 13 regular seasons. And then they were the Division I state champions in 2014 when they went 25-1. My claim to fame is that when we were that one loss on their record during that outstanding state championship season. I think that loss motivated his team to be a much better team as they made that run to the state championship. Because all I heard for 2 months from Coach Gray whenever he was interviewed on TV, radio, and the paper was, well, that loss at Ontario, we learned this. I finally caught Coach Gray and said, hey, I don't mind you saying it, but when I heard your wife say it in the paper, really kind of disappointed me. But Coach Gray, one of the best coaches in the area, great run at Norwalk, and of course, one of my best friends. And I can't go without bringing up this guy, even though we never played a regular season game against each other. A great friend of mine, Bob Van Kennel, who is the head basketball coach at Dover High School. Bob's won over 700 games in his coaching career. He is also a member of our Coaches Hall of Fame. Although we never played Dover during the regular season or the tournament, Dover is a team that we typically scrimmage each year in the preseason and many times during the summer. Bob is a coach I have tremendous respect for and have learned a ton about the game of basketball from him. He is a great tactician of the game and runs some of the best offensive sets of any coach I've ever seen. Probably the best thing I learned from Bob was the importance of special situations. Baseline out-of-bounds plays, sideline out-of-bounds plays, end-of-quarter situations, end-of-game situations. After scrimmaging him for a couple of years, I realized how important these situations could affect the outcome of the game. One of the best stories in scrimmaging Bob is that typically Bob never got a full preseason of practice because of the success of the Dover football team. They would always make deep runs into the football playoffs. One year, we were scheduled to scrimmage Bob on a Wednesday after they lost in the football playoffs on a Saturday. When Bob arrived, he said that his team had not practiced yet this year, and this would be their first time together on the floor. On their first 5 possessions, Bob ran 5 different sets and scored on every set. That tells you how good of a coach Bob Van Kennel was. I've been very fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches during my coaching career, and I've had the opportunity to learn a lot from them. These are 5 of the top guys on my list, but I could add so many more. Steve Moore, who I coached against at Shelby, Greg Nosselman, who currently is at Orange and Tangier Liberty, and I coached against at Willard, Tim Byrie, who was a coach at St. Pete's, Crestline, and Galleon, and I went to many Bob Knight clinics with him, and of course the 2 Sheldon brothers, David and Chris. They've both been guys that I really respect. So that's Coach B's Ballers for this week, coaches that I've gone against in my coaching career.